All right, everyone. Um, Thank you so much for joining. We're just starting on U of T time here as we had some folks that were still waiting to arrive. But thank you so much for joining our information session for the UC Dawn, COCO, and community assistant positions for the 2026 year. Thank you so much for showing interest in these roles. My name is Viddy. I am the coordinator of student community development, and I use she, her pronouns.
Hi, my name is Gillen. I am the Residence Life Coordinator here at UC, and I use he, him pronouns. So just a few group guidelines for today. Please throughout the session. Oh, firstly, this session is recorded. So please know that. Um, if you are uncomfortable with that, we do have an in-person session that it will not be recorded in January that you are welcome to attend to. But please know that this session will be recorded and posted on our hiring website. So if you do ask a question, that will be a part of it. Just some group guidelines for today. Please make sure that your mic is muted. If you have any questions, please submit them in the chat. Um, at the end of the session, we'll have a Q&A where you're welcome to raise your hand and ask a question verbally if called upon. And if you're experiencing any technical difficulties, please message Vidya or I. Thank you. So just a land acknowledgement. I wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. So just a session outline today. I'll be discussing University College values. What is a DON? What is a CA? What is a COCO? The application process, and then having a Q&A. But before we do that, we have a wonderful bunch of DONs and COCOs here who will introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, my name is Danielle. I use she, her pronouns. I am a residence don this year in Loudon House, but last year I was a program don. And part of the reason I wanted to be a don was really to help first year students wayfind throughout their first year with good resources that helps them when they have any needs. And yeah, just love being able to support and see my students succeed.
Hello, my name is Charlize. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a community coordinator. I wanted to become a COCO because I really enjoy getting involved in the communities that I belong to.
Hello, my name is Belle. I'm a community coordinator too. I wanted to be a COCO because I personally took part in a lot of programs that COCOs did in first year, and I wanted to continue that tradition and develop more programs for student needs.
Hey everyone, I'm Dina. I'm also a residence don. I am a residence don in ULOC. My pronouns are she, her. And the reason I wanted to be a don was I was very involved with Frosh Week as a head leader, and I really liked that first year engagement. So I wanted to help create community in residence.
Awesome, thank you everyone. All right, moving on.
Yeah, just as we go into thinking about the Dawn rule, we really want to first look at university colleges' values. So I'd love to just brainstorm a little bit, whether that's engaging in the chat or whether that's raising your hand and unmuting your mic. What are some values of university college that you can think of? Maybe that's a specific example in how university college is different from some other colleges, or just things that you've observed more personally. Yeah, just take around like a minute or two to do that. Again, you can engage through the chat or unmute your mic. So I'm seeing in the chat here, I think youth being that UC is big on building a strong sense of community and inclusion. I see another point at inclusivity. Awesome. That's some great values to think about. Is there any more that we want to think about just before I move on? Okay, I think that will just continue to move on, but inclusivity is a really great point to make about some of UC's values. Actually, part of UC's vision statement really looks at how we want to create a welcoming community built on, relevant opportunities for education and research that help students to intellectually engage and prepare for their opportunities in the wider world. And so, within residence, we really want to, at residence and commuter support services, we want to create and foster spaces where students can engage within the wider world. And in particular, engage in events that will help them to navigate their university experience. I think we can move on to what does it mean to be a Don? Again, engaging in the chat or unmuting your mic. Maybe you live in residence right now, or maybe you're starting to think about what it means to live in residence. What do you think some of the responsibilities of a Don might be? So we'll just take around 1 to 2 minutes for that again. Can be a small thought, doesn't have to be a big thought, but I'm seeing some answers in chat. So Dons support students living residence. Yeah, absolutely. Dons engage with students in building community. They create supportive environments. They connect them to resources. Dons responds to crisis. Dons oversee people living on res and ensure safety, and people enjoy their time at UC. And Dons enjoy creating student community and providing support. Those are some awesome answers. We'll just actually outline more specifically the role of being a Don. Residents are responsible for creating supportive, inclusive residence environments that include all the needs of students and make space for those needs to be addressed, whether that's through academic, personal, financial, interpersonal, or social resources, especially relating to those concerns. They are responsible for responding to crises, as well as supplying information about residence life facilities and university services. And we work actually with the residence residence office and residence life staff to develop and facilitate those education-related programming pieces and resources. And residence Dons are under the USW Local 1998 College Residence Don Bargaining Unit, and it is a unionized position, and that will feed into some of the remuneration pieces, as well as work regulations that we'll speak about later. Yeah, so let us go into what it means to be a UC Don in particular. So there's 3 types of roles as a Don that you can organize into, but generally speaking, as first-time applicants, you'll either be looking to apply as a residence Don or a program Don. And so residence Dons are supplied across all 3 buildings, our Sir Daniel Wilson residence, as well as our Morrison Hall residence and Whitney Hall residence. And so within Sir Daniel Wilson Hall, one of the residents I'm a Don at, we only have single Dons, whereas in Morrison Hall and at Whitney Hall, there are some opportunities to be paired up with other Dons and work as a co-Don pair. There's one head Don in each of the residents, and they oversee the operations of all the residence Dons and facilitate meetings. And within Whitney Hall in particular, some residence Dons can take on the additional role of being a living and learning community Don that focuses on providing resources and programs specific to topics such as health and wellness, global perspectives, arts and culture, life sciences. In addition to residence dons, 2 program dons also support our residence-wide programming, and they provide some additional support in Whitney Hall and Sir Daniel. Yeah, looking more specifically at some of the breakdowns of the residence don role, you'll notice that there's some overlap between residence don and program dons, as well as head dons, but there are some distinctions that we'll make note of. So just broadly speaking, residence dons, program dons, and head dons all look at providing student support, and that can be through one-on-one student support, or as was mentioned in the chat, responding to crises, providing resources. Residence dons and program dons and head dons all provide residence-wide programming, as mentioned, and these are things that engage in educational resource to share educational resources with students, and that it's done in a variety of ways, whether through meetings or active activities. And more specifically, all dons work with the residence life staff who help their professional development through our don meetings, for example, our building team meetings and full team meetings, as well as regular check-ins. So there's always access points to support as a don. So just to note that if you're interested in any one of these roles, whether that's the residence don role or the program don role, you will need to mark that down on your application to be a don. And for people that are interested in the program don role specifically, it's really ideal for those that are looking to take on more of a leadership role in program development. So you wouldn't necessarily have a house, but you would be working with more residence-wide event planning and those specific pieces. Yeah. So again, the previous slide was just a very general overview, but feel free to ask any questions if you have about the specifics of that role. So yeah, we will now move on to the life of a don.
Great. Yeah, so I'm Dina, pronouns are she, her. And I will be going into the life of a don. So the first thing we're going to be looking at is a monthly snapshot. So just, I want to note that this is definitely a busier month. Just note that you will have only once a semester, you'll have a theme week and a building team res slide. So just keep that in mind. Yes, program dons do also live in residence. So I just want to note that program dons and residence dons will both live in residence. But yeah, so just back to the snapshots. We'll start with the first week. You'll have your building team meeting every other week, and that will alternate with the full team meeting. So both of those will be on a Sunday evening, and that will be an hour meeting. You'll also have one-on-ones. So one-on-ones are a chance for you to get to know your students. You're expected to have one with each student every semester. So you can imagine that you can schedule them as you'd like throughout the semester. But in this month, we have a couple of those scheduled in. Another responsibility here on the 6th, as an example, is an on-call shift. So you'll have about 2 to 3 on-call shifts per month. And those can land on a weekday or a weekend. And some of the responsibilities around that are doing rounds and holding the on-call phone and responding to any crisis or any calls you get throughout the night. And then writing a little report or log the next day. Another example of a commitment that you'd have throughout the month, on the 10th here, we have the one-on-one with someone from the assistant STEAM residence life or the professional staff. So that'll just be a checkpoint for you to kind of let them know how you're doing, how your programming is going, if there are any issues in your house, or if you need any support. So really it's just a checkpoint, and that happens once per month. And then here on the 12th, we have a house social event. This is one of the fun things. So planning, programming, or socials happen 1 to 3 times a month. And that can be anything you'd like, as long as there's like a learning or there's a development aspect for students. So that could be like a movie night. It could be making gingerbread cookies. It could be maybe learning different like study techniques if it's like around exam season and it's relevant. And then again, here we have some more one-on-ones. And then on the Saturday, we have house exec meeting. So you will have your house council, which will be made up of students that run in September. And you'll have a 1 hour checkpoint with them every month just to check in with how things are doing, check if they need any supports, and also check if there are any issues that you might not be aware of in the house. And then again, you have those building team meetings and full team meetings. I do want to note the difference. So a building team meeting is a meeting with your building, like Whitney, and then a full team meeting is a meeting with the entire staff, all the residence dons and the pro staff. And then I will go to the 15th here. You have a house meeting. So you'll have one house meeting per month with your house. And then the next day here we have a house talk, and you'll have one house talk every once a month, except for December. And the difference is a house meeting is more so a chance for students to get updates and maybe bring some concerns or questions they have. And it's just really general information. And the house talk is more conversational based and more discussion based around specific topics each month. And it's more of a chance for students to kind of like share about their experiences and also learn from other students' experiences. And then I think everything else on here I've covered. Oh, and then I guess the building residence wide. Yes, yeah, building residence wide and student concern. I'll start with the res wide. So once a semester, you'll have your building residence wide that will be planned mainly, or I guess led by the head John, and then the entire building team will kind of help put that together. And then one of the most important things that I think I did miss is student concern and crisis. And I think with that, it's not something you can schedule in. So it's something that you should keep in mind and keep time aside for. Throughout the semester or throughout the year, you'll have students come to you with different issues and different concerns. And it is your responsibility as their Don to kind of help them work through that and help them find the resources to kind of solve whatever it is that they're looking for. And a part of kind of supporting students in their concern and crisis is by just being present. So you see a lot of those issues by being in residence. They might come knock on your door, they might send you an email. So just being open to receiving like those messages and making sure your students feel like they can come to you when they have a concern. It can also be like crisis, and you'll have some crisis management taught throughout Dawn training. Yeah, so time commitment. We'll move into this. Okay, so it varies week to week, but I will note that it is between 10 to 15 hours a week. That is throughout the school year. In terms of training to be residence Dawn, there is a pre-service training that takes place 2 weeks before orientation week. So that would be kind of in the middle of August, 3rd week of August, and the 4th week of August, right before orientation or Frosh week. And then note there's also one in-service day during the academic semester, and you'll get that date closer to the date. One thing to note about pre-service training is it is very, it's rigorous and it is mandatory. So just keep that in mind that it is from 9 in the morning to 5 p.m. or even sometimes into the evening. So just when you're planning things for the summer, just note that you'll have that you need to have that time booked aside. And Dawn training should be kind of your number one priority, not only during training, but throughout the school year as well. And it's noted here as well, it should be your primary extracurricular professional experience of the year, as it is a big commitment. And another thing to keep in mind while looking at the time commitment is balancing the 10 to 15 hours a week on top of your academics, and making sure you're able to kind of schedule like Dawn responsibilities into being a student. Okay, great. So we'll go into the benefits of being a Dawn. Yeah, so there are a bunch of benefits. Some here are the development of many skills. You learn how to be more communicative. You learn how to facilitate meetings. You learn how to collaborate with other students and professional staff. You learn how to put on events. I think one thing that I personally learned was how to facilitate meetings and get really comfortable with it. When you're doing it almost like on a monthly or bi-weekly basis, you really just get really comfortable with your own techniques and facilitation techniques. And all of these skills are very transferable to many different roles and responsibilities that might be outside of residence life. So just keep that in mind. And another thing that's really great is you're building community on campus. So I know a lot of students will come into the role because they want to build that community. So you do get to do that as residents on. And then one other thing to keep in mind is you're part of a team. So you're part of residents dons at UC, and you don't just have that full team touch point. We have some socials throughout the year. So you really do get a chance to feel like you're part of a team and have people in your program. We will move into remuneration.
All right. So the Dawn role at University College is unionized. They have a unit within the United Steelworkers 1998. Something to note is that this is not a traditional job. As of right now, in the current collective agreement between the unit and the university, there is no hourly wage. Dons are paid 75% of a standard single room and 100% of the fee for the highest level meal plan in their unit. So it's just something to keep in mind. I'd recommend reading over that collective agreement and if should you apply. The other thing to note is that because you're not paid an hourly wage, you will not have additional pay for or spending money as the collective agreement is written now. You are also not always in charge of your own schedule. Dina pointed out earlier in the slides that it's not a standard job. It's not a job where you're working in like 3 hours and then your set shift. It's really all daily. You're living here. Students might talk to you in the hallways. And so it's a different kind of role. But it's important to note dons are provided single occupancy suites or a room rather in one of our 3 residence buildings from the beginning of this dawn training, so mid-August until May 1st, 2026. And for the month of August, a payment of $500 is provided for dawn training, dawn and cocoa and CA training rather.
All right, let's move on to what is a community assistant. I do want to point out as we go into talking about what a community assistant is, you might see some overlapping responsibilities with the community assistant and the community coordinator, but rest assured, we will make sure that we're able to show you that they are 2 different roles with some overlapping responsibilities. So feel free to throw in the chat or raise your hand. So what do you think a community assistant is? We'll just give everyone a second. If you don't have answers, that's totally okay. We're going to get into talking about what community assistant is. Gillen, I'm just going to ask you to go back 1 slide.
Oh, sorry.
Yep.
Here?
No, before life of a CA. Yeah, perfect. All right, what is a community assistant? Well, as you may know, some of the community coordinators have done this year, and similarly, community assistants will plan and implement student life programming based on the needs and desires of the university college community. So this could be different educational events or events in general. We had some lovely events thrown this semester by our community coordinators, and I'm sure they'll be able to speak a little bit more to that. Community assistants are there to foster and sustain an engaged off-campus commuter student community. As you can see, we do have supports and resources for residents dons, but we also want to make sure that we're able to build that sense of community within our off-campus commuter space. And this can include animating and providing programming in college spaces frequented by off-campus students, including spaces like the CSC, the Commuter Student Center, and also the Clark Reading Room. Community assistants are there to support and sustain a supportive and inclusive atmosphere in the CC and Clark Reading Room where students can study, learn, and socialize and build a community together. All right, so let's just jump into the life of a CA. And like I mentioned earlier, we'll be able to differentiate what a community coordinator and a CA is and what the differences are, and the COCOs will speak a little bit more to that. So CAs will focus on program development. This is developing and facilitating events and programs. So during a semester, you are given a set of programs to do, whether that be an active program or a passive program. And you plan the program and you facilitate it, and it can take place in the CC or the Clark Reading Room, etc. So we're evaluating outreach and engagement for students. And we're also attending all meetings and training workshop sessions as required. So similarly to the DONs, the CAs, and the COCOs will have a summer training session. And they will also have a similar pre-service training session that will take place typically that year as well. And you'll also be required to, attend all of those good meetings that are facilitated by your community coordinators and also myself. Community engagement, collaborations with campus partners and resources. You'll find that sometimes our COCOs and CAs will collaborate with different resources and partners on campus, like the Mental Health Association, etc. You'll be conducting weekly office hours and actively connecting with University College and exploring ways to develop engagement for in-person spaces. All right, so you want to be a CA. Let's talk about that time commitment. So CAs will be doing some office hours, as I mentioned earlier. It'll be no more than 10 hours per week. CAs are paid an hourly wage of $20. Being a CA should be your primary co-curricular and professional experience of the year. What does that mean? So you can apply to be a DON or community assistant, but the thing is, when you have to decide, you have to only pick one. You can't choose both. And so CAs also balance academics and CA responsibilities. What are the benefits of being a community assistant? So similar to the DONs, we have some leadership experience, development leadership experience, event planning, communication, and interpersonal relationships, advising and critical thinking leaderships, taking on community mentorship roles to develop engagement. Sorry. My battery is dying. Taking on community mentorship roles to develop engagement with university college community and learn student development and support skills that you can use personally and professionally. So a lot of the skills that you develop here can also be used in outside roles outside of this. You're talking to students on a daily basis. You're helping plan programs and events, and that's huge, and making sure people attend to those events. And you're marketing them to the students to ensure that, you have turnout at these events as well. All right, so now I'm going to pass it over to a community coordinator to talk a little bit more about the community coordinator role.
Okay, so moving on to a community coordinator, let's take this moment to just brainstorm, and I would love for you guys to tell what you think a community coordinator is in the chat or by raising your hand. We see some responses. Building UC student events programming. Yes, that's definitely one of the roles. That's one of the part of the role. That's one of the part of the role. Supporting non-resident students. Yes, yes, we definitely support commuter students. Sorry about that. Providing a welcome and drop-in space in CSC. Yes, that's definitely one of the part of the role. So moving on to the role itself, we plan and implement student life programming based on the needs and the desires of the university college community. This really depends on the time of the year, whether sometimes when it's close to finals, we do more stuff like study jams and learning study techniques, but then sometimes it can be fun events like a Taylor Swift event. We also provide peer leadership, facilitation, support to a team of 3 community assistants. So the community coordinators will have a team of 3 community assistants each, and then providing appropriate referrals to university college staff, resources, services, resources, and programs to students experiencing personal, academic, financial, interpersonal, social concerns. There's sometimes where students really are looking for resources to be referred to, and as community coordinators, we aim to do that for them. Being present as appropriate at college events as a representative of the university administration, and then also animating the University College Community Student Center and the Clark Reading Room, so creating a lively and welcoming environment in the CSC as well as the CRR. So moving on to the life of a COCO. So Life of Cocoa includes developing programs. As I mentioned, we develop and facilitate events and programs throughout the year. We evaluate outreach and engagement for student engagements. We try to understand the student engagement, specific programs, and then attending all the meetings, training, workshop series as required. Like Vidya mentioned, there is that in-service training in August, and there's an in-person one-day training, usually in January. And then community engagement, collaboration with campus partners and resources, weekly office hours, and actively connecting with University College, exploring ways to develop engagement for in-person and online spaces. So moving on to other responsibilities of a COCO, we also provide student support. We provide support for a team of 3 community assistants and also other students. We support orientation and transition programs for commuter students. We support other students, like commuter students or other students as well in U of T with their personal, academic, financial, interpersonal, social concerns by referring them to the right resources and supplying information on commuter life, resources, and referral services, including academic, health, counseling, and financial aid, and addressing student behavioral issues that impact the safety, well-being, or enjoyment of commuters in the CSC and the Clark Reading Room. So moving on, I'm going to give the floor to the other COCO.
So now we're going to be talking about what time commitment of a COCO looks like. So to start, we don't work more than 10 hours per week, and community coordinators are paid an hourly wage of $25.44. Being a COCO should be the primary co-curricular and /or professional experience of the year, and we also look to balance academics and COCO responsibilities during our time. So on to the benefits of being a COCO. So definitely we develop a lot of leadership experience, including but not limited to event planning, communication and interpersonal relationships, advising students, and critical thinking and leadership. We definitely take on a community mentorship role to develop engagement with the university college community. In addition, we also learn student development and support skills that you can use personally and professionally.
All right, thank you. Eligibility. So this is eligibility for all these roles. You must be a full-time registered student in the 2025-2026 academic year. That includes people who might have accommodations where they're taking 2.0 courses, but they are registered with accessibility services, and they are still full-time students due to accommodation that gives them that status. They count towards that. That is fine. I just like to answer that because sometimes we get that question. Must be able to perform as a DAWN community coordinator, community assistant for the entire 2025-2026 academic year, including pre-service training from August 11th to August 22nd. So if you can't do this job, if you're planning on doing a semester abroad in the winter semester of January, or sorry, of 2026, or if you have an internship that goes until August 20th, that's full time, and you will miss training. Regretfully, you also aren't eligible to do this job. It is recommended for DAWNs to have prior residence or group living experience, but prior experience living in residence is not required. And it is also recommended for community coordinators, community assistants to have prior experience in living off campus. But prior experience living off campus is also not a requirement.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the application process. So these are just some things to consider when applying. So on the screen here, you can see our winter hiring timeline. Applications are now open. They're open as of Monday, December 2nd. Applications, if you are a first-time applier, are due in January. There's a date on the screen there, January 12th at 11:59 p.m. There will be a mini interview. If you are successful through the first application process, you'll be invited for a mini interview. And as the dates on the screen say, January 20th to January 22nd, please keep in mind that these dates include being asked to do the mini interview. You're sent the invite to actually do it, you complete it. So that's what happens within this time period. This timeline includes that you'll receive that invitation and also submit your response. It is a little bit of a quick turnaround, but shortly after that, if you were successful with that mini interview, you will be invited to do a group interview we call Carousel, which will take place Saturday, February 1st. Offers to employment will be sent out mid-March. I do recommend taking a peek at our UC website there. That link is there below, but if you throw that into Google, I'm sure you'll be able to find it as well. But there's lots of great information there. So if you're seriously considering applying to be a Don, a COCO, or a community assistant, I do recommend giving this website a read. And all of this great information about the application process will be there as well. If you do want to revisit this video, it is being recorded. After this meeting has been completed, a link will be posted on the website as well. So if you do want to revisit any of the information, the link to the video will be there.
So now we're going to be moving on to our Q&A session. So we have some, I guess, frequently asked questions that we're just going to be going through. I'll be pointing it towards my fellow COCO and some of the Dons that we have here just to kind of get an idea. If you also have any other questions, you can drop them in the chat and we'll see if we can get through all of them. So the first question we have here is, what are the top 3 skills the hiring team is looking for in a residence Don? And I'm going to point this towards either Danielle or Dina to answer.
You can also be a part of answer questions too.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess I feel like there's not necessarily a set top 3 skills, but definitely leadership would be one of them. Interpersonal skills, communication is definitely a big thing. And a third one, if anyone would like to step in and suggest a third top skill.
A third top skill I think is really important for the residence Don is just critical thinking. Really being able to make those decisions that will have a good outcome, whether that's responding to an emergency or just thinking on a daily level, interacting with people one-on-one, what would be the best response to some of those situations. To add on a few other skills that I think are really important is organization and time management. It's a high, it's a time-consuming job, but it can be very manageable if you have the good organizational and time management skills to balance your academics, other jobs, other extracurriculars. It's entirely possible to fulfill the Don role to its fullest and still be able to enjoy many other opportunities across U of T. I also think another really relevant skill, that I think not a lot of people think about is asking for help, actually. There will be some components of the residence Don role you may not know about in the first couple of months while you're navigating things, but unless you ask questions, unless you know who to talk to about those inquiries, you won't get the answers that you need. So it's really important, as even you're applying to thinking about being a residence Don, how would you approach problem solving for yourself? So yeah, those are some things that I would mention.
I'll just add that there is no perfect John or Coco or CA. Like, we really look at everyone's as an individual, and we take a strengths-based approach. And some people are better at things. Some people have strengths in other areas. in areas they're still developing. We don't want a team of all A types. So I just want to put that out there.
So next question that we're going to be looking at is, what do overnight on-call shifts entail for the residence dawn and program dawn positions?
Okay, I can take this. Yeah, so 2 to 3 times a month you'll be on call, and you will be on call in the pairing. So you and another residence dawn or program dawn. And that will look like taking the resident's phone and one of the two dawns holding the phone overnight, and the second dawn being responsible for any kind of reporting that comes with that, if there are any incidents throughout the shift. So you take the phone and then you kind of go about your day, so you can go to sleep, but you just have to be in residence. You might get some calls throughout the night, and that's when you would have to go and kind of deal with the situations. You can call your second dawn on call to help you kind of navigate those situations. There are some situations where you don't need another dawn. If it's like a noise complaint and it's in your house, you might be able to just walk over and give them a suggestion as an example. But it kind of just entails being available and ready to wake up when necessary and address situations. And then the second part of that is just making sure you're reporting everything the next day to make sure that the resident staff has documentation of any incidents that took place throughout the night. So just making sure you're in residence throughout the night. It is from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. the next day.
The other thing I'll add is just your people Dawn's on call, that you have your Dawn on call partner, but you two as are that pair is never alone. There is also a staff on call who is available to assist when there are incidents that are a bit complicated or need more support.
Next, we're going to be looking at this question: does seeing your students around residence ever make you feel pressured to be on at all times or in dawn mode, so to speak? I can definitely speak for my role as a community coordinator. Seeing students that have helped give resources or help through a tricky time afterwards, whether walking around campus or again in the CSC. I wouldn't say that it's being on at all times, but definitely being prepared for anything. As Danielle was saying earlier, critical thinking is definitely a big part of it, but definitely don't feel pressured to always be in the dawn role, but you are always in your role. But you shouldn't feel an expectation to always definitely be looking to help, but you're not always required to be the first person to help.
Danielle or Dina, do you want to add anything? Or maybe like talk about the fishbowl?
Don't know that anecdote.
Oh,
Living in a fishbowl.
So, yeah, I think sometimes being a dawn can sometimes feel like people are observing you from the outside and they're just seeing everything and all that you do. Although, sometimes you can feel that pressure, I think a really important part about being a dawn, and this is inclusive to residence dawn training and program dawn training, and even for COCOs as well, is setting really appropriate boundaries as to, how can you create good relationships with your students? How can you be friendly, but maybe not be friends with all of your students in a very close and personal way, because you do need to have your own life, but be able to fulfill the dawn role when it's appropriate. So really, it's about keeping those boundaries in place, and always knowing who is also responsible during the times when you're not on. When you're not supposed to be a quote unquote a dawn, right? There's always going to be other dons that are on call, or there's going to be pro-life staff or residence life staff able and appropriate to respond to some inquiries and issues students might have. So it's really knowing your boundaries and being able to refer students to other staff that are available to respond to their issues when they come up.
Next question that we have here is, what experience can/should I have to make my application stronger? I can definitely say that there's no monolith experience that will support your application in any way that you should be looking for. In my experience, I applied during my first year, so I didn't have a whole resume of experiences, but for example, I was a part of the residence council in the residence I lived in first year, so that may help. But definitely just sort through whatever you've done and kind of find the valuable things in it. So even if it was a small experience, saying that you were able to help students or you found leadership in that role will definitely be helpful. But there is no specific experience that you should be looking for.
I just wanted to add on to that really quickly. We do understand that applying for these jobs, whether it be the first time or the second time, can be a little intimidating. So there will be a resume and cover letter workshop that we will be hosting sometime in January. So I would keep an eye on the hiring website, just that link that was there before in the application process slide, for details as to when that workshop will be happening.
And now we have you ever found it difficult to connect with the students in your house? If so, what steps did you take? And have you ever felt disrespected or hurt by students in your house or around residents, either in general or about part of your identity? If so, how did you react and manage this? In my experience as a community coordinator, kind of as Danielle was speaking about earlier, setting boundaries, I've had students come up and ask personal questions about me that I may not have felt necessarily comfortable responding to, but I wouldn't say I felt disrespected or hurt, but just setting up the boundaries and taking the next steps. If you feel that is speaking to professional staff, your direct supervisor about this, that's definitely a thing, but that's definitely my experience with it. If anyone else would like to share theirs.
I think within residence, sometimes it can be difficult to connect with students just because students are coming from a variety of different experiences, a variety of different backgrounds. And sometimes your connection points with some students will be different than others. And it also just depends on some students' personalities. Some people may not want to socialize where others may love to engage more with their broader residence community. So I think it's important as within the residence Dawn role, you expect all of those differences as you go into the role and find your leeway to adjust. But really, in a practical sense, when I find it difficult to connect to students, I try to use some more universal uh, things that people might enjoy. For example, I love to bring food to house meetings. I love to bring little activities students can do, things that remind students and encourage students about their experience in their first year. I love to do little encouragement notes here and there. And I found that using a very personal approach as well to how I engage with my students helps invite my students to engage with me more as we grow in our relationship throughout the year, as I get to know them more. I wouldn't say I have felt hurt or disrespected. Again, as Charlize said, putting up important boundaries really prevents that from happening. And obviously, within reason, you can oftentimes logically understand where students are coming from, especially if they're acting in a certain way that may not or may not be appropriate. But as always, if there's any particular situations that get out of hand, those are situations that you would address to residence life staff. But yeah, I wouldn't say, yeah, any part of my identity has felt restricted or constricted within the residence role. I've been very freely able to express my own beliefs and thoughts, and it's a really great experience as well for me to learn about the thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors of other students as well.
I'm just gonna also add that the Office of the Dean of Students really prioritizes our student staff's well-being, safety, and will always back them up. One of our values, as we discussed earlier in the presentation, was equity. So that is, yeah, so we expect that of the members of our college as well.
Okay, so now we're going to be looking at one of our last few questions. Definitely remember to drop any additional questions you have in the chat if it didn't come up throughout this Q&A session. But we're going to be looking at what advice would you offer to someone applying? Definitely through the application process, And as it gets to the mini interview, and if you proceed on to the group interview, definitely being yourself. As Gillen mentioned earlier, there's no perfect candidate for any of the roles. I'd also like to note that, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of value in your individual lived experience, so definitely take that into account. Residence dons or students who are living on residence, and community coordinators are students who live off campus. So you already kind of have some piece in the role in you, and definitely just kind of look at how you can contribute to it, both from your experience and thinking about what other students may have as their own experiences.
I would recommend, as someone that didn't have any residence experience coming into the Don role, and having very little related experience to the application process for a Don, I would really recommend thinking about what are some transferable skills that you have from other opportunities that you could speak to, any specific experiences that you could speak to that relate to some of the tasks and responsibilities that either the Don or COCO or community advisor role outlines. Thinking about how you can bring that and develop that within the role, and really speak to some of the interests that you might have, expanding on your learning. If there are pieces within any role that you may not be familiar with, but you'd love to learn more about, really speak to that. I think that shows and demonstrates that you're a person of growth and that you want to be someone that is continuously shaped by your experiences. Additionally, in a more practical sense, I think really just think about how you word things. Make it clear, make it coherent, run it through a grammar checker. Sometimes having some very clear sentence structure can help people evaluate what you're writing, and have some better consideration about how they can understand you through your writing as well.
Sorry. Vinny, did you have anything you wanted to add? Not to put you on the spot, I'm just with the.
I think what was mentioned is great. I really like the point that Charlize mentioned earlier. Be your most authentic self when going through the application process. I think it's better to come as yourself rather than to mold yourself into something someone might think you to be. We appreciate your own authenticity, all of your own authentic experiences, and we really value those.
For people who are interested in applying to a residence don role, I'm gonna let I think that we really want you to apply to UC. However, there are lots of residence don roles all over the university. As someone who applied, who was a don at one time and applied to multiple colleges, but was only hired at one, I recommend applying to multiple divisions or looking at what's out there. You can apply, just because you apply does not mean that you have to accept. We have a common offer date on the residence don side, so you don't, we coordinate that deadline. But I'd recommend just looking at what else is out there, because what is more important to you is having that don role more important to you, or having that don role at UC. But we still want you, so apply here. And choose us as well. All right. Was there any more questions in the chat?
Okay, let's start with the raised hand, and then I can read the next question in the chat afterwards.
Is that me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, you can hear me. I was wondering if being hired for any of these roles bars you from other work studies. And I understand that this role should be your main vocation, but just for like financial and personal reasons, like, is it possible to have another work study role at the same time?
So work study roles, so there is no, you're not prevented from having a work study role. In the work study program, there is only a requirement that you just have one work study, not multiple, but this is not, the COCO and CA and Dawn roles are not work studies, so those are two different things. I would only say really make sure that you can manage your time, and it might, yeah, and should you take a work study, I would advise taking a work study with less hours. Some people find that the first semester of having this job and work is really the time where they learn how to properly time manage and adapt to the role, and it can be quite a challenge in that first semester. So just should you, yeah, but long story short, yes, you can have both.
Amazing, thank you.
All right. Next question is, would it be required / preferred for someone to have previous Dawn experience to apply to be a head Dawn? I was also wondering if a program Dawn is offered residents in one of the buildings too. Thanks.
It is usually a head Dawn is someone who usually has Dawn experience, but we never like, should there be an applicant who is a strong leader, we would select them if they did really well, and were the best candidate ultimately. So you're still welcome to apply to that, even if you haven't been a Dawn before. And program Dawns are offered residence in one of the buildings.
Same thing goes for the community coordinator role. We would say that, like, if you still have strong leadership experience and can attest to that, and you want to apply for the community coordinator role, I would still go for that. And I'm gonna go on to the next question now. There's one more question before we wrap up, if that's okay. What are your expectations for the past experience questions in the application, specifically about the length of the response? And I think I can answer that, and maybe Gillen can add on. But regarding the length of responses and applications, I wouldn't necessarily say that, like, there is a word limit or something like that. I would just say that if you feel that you've answered a question to the best of your ability and it is a certain length, I would say that's okay. I would just recommend that when you are filling out the application, just make sure you're giving yourself that space to really think about the question, and answer it to the best of your ability. Thank you so much. All right. All right. Well, thank you so much, folks, for coming to the info session. I hope that it was informative, and thank you so much for some lovely questions. And shout out to our Dons and Cocos here that volunteered. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk about your authentic experiences in these roles. For folks that are still here, please make sure to keep an eye on that website. It'll give you updates about when applications are due and all those good workshops that we talked about that are going to be coming up in January. But other than that, thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, and all the best.
Thank you, everyone, and good luck. Have a great, good luck on your exams, and have a great break.